你好. 谢谢你. Thank you for being here. I promise you this is going to be a great evening. I understand that people in Singapore are some of the smartest people in the world. Is that true? Did anyone not understand the question? Well, that means you can take a lot of information in a short period of time. Is that right? Say yes. Yes. So I'm going to give you a lot of good ideas very fast, like dealing cards. Okay? Now, I came to Singapore first in 1968. In 1968, you've seen the old parts of Singapore? All of Singapore was the old parts. I came back again in 1989. I was here in 1968, 69, 1970. I was away for many years. I came back in 89, and Singapore was suddenly the best run country in the world. Cleanest city, best run country in the world. In half a generation, you beat everybody, and now you beat the United States in gross national product per person. Is that right? When are you going to stop? Where else can you go from here? I am so proud of you. I am so proud of you. Everywhere I go, I talk about Singapore. I love this country. If I wasn't living in the United States, where the climate is nice, I would love to live in Singapore. This is a beautiful place. What you've created here is a triumph of the human mind, because Singapore has been built on mind power, not manpower. Singapore has been built with brains and ability and talent and drive and vision and determination. It is really an incredible place. It's really an incredible place, and so I congratulate you, and I tell you I'm very happy to be here. And I'm very happy to be able to share some ideas that may help you move even faster forward. Now, I have some good news for you, and I have more good news, and only good news tonight. The good news is that we are living in the very best time in all of human history. The stock markets may be going up and down. The American stock market is simply overpriced. You know, the stocks are too high, because during the 90s everybody went crazy, and now they're still a little crazy, and the prices will have to come down until they stop being crazy. A stock is merely an investment to get a return. That's all it is, and the returns aren't there, so the stocks have lower value, and when the stocks go down to the level of the return, it will stabilize and life will go on. But the good news is that we have no major wars. Most of the major diseases have been solved, have been cured, and that we have entered into basically a free market world. And Singapore is perfectly positioned to be one of the most prosperous nations for as far as we can see for 100 years. And the opportunities for you have never been greater in all of human history than now, except for tomorrow and next year and the year after. I have lived and worked and traveled in almost 90 countries. And I can tell you there's a lot of crummy countries out there. There's a lot of countries that you only want to go to once, or you want to get through quickly. And 100 years from now, they will still be poor. But Singapore will be more prosperous and more prosperous and more prosperous. So your job is to participate fully in the prosperity of the future, right? How many people here would like to double their income? If I could show you how to double your income, will you give it a try? Now, I've studied this subject for my entire life. I have trained over 2 million people, and I have created probably thousands of people who've gone from absolutely nothing to becoming millionaires, including in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Laos, not Laos, but Indonesia, I'm sorry about Indonesia, the Philippines, Hong Kong, much of Latin America. My programs are distributed in 20 languages in 35 countries, and tens of thousands of people have been through the programs, and many have dramatically changed their lives with the tools and the ideas that I'm going to give to you. Now, we have 3 hours together, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the very best ideas that I know, and I'm going to condense them into our 3 hours, okay? And I'm going to give you, in the first half, I'm going to talk about what I call the psychology of success. We can call it the psychology of selling, because it's the psychology or the mental way of achieving anything. In the second half, I'm going to show you how to apply this specifically to how to sell more, how to double your sales, how to double your income, and so on, okay? Is that a good deal? Say yes. In the middle, we'll have a break. All right? Okay. Now, I started off my life poorly. I did not graduate from high school. I finished in the half of the class that made the top half possible. I couldn't get any kind of a job, so I worked at laboring jobs. My first job was washing dishes in the back of a hotel, small hotel. And then I went to washing cars with a car lot. And then I went to washing floors with a janitorial service. I thought washing was in my future, but it was sort of downhill, washing. And then I worked as a construction laborer. And then I worked on farms, and I worked on ranches, and I worked on a ship in the North Atlantic. And I worked at laboring jobs until I was about 22, 23. And how many people here are in sales? Well, when I couldn't get a job, laboring job, I got into sales too, just like you. So I know where you're coming from. And actually, I started my sales career here in Southeast Asia. I used to sell here on the streets of Singapore. I used to work traveling from city to city around Southeast Asia selling. So I know what it's like to sell here in Singapore on these streets in the summertime when it's hot. It's hot, hotter, and hotter still. It's never cool. You pray for rain, all right? I know what it's like. I used to be drenched, and that's before you got out of the house, you know. So I went and I worked very hard. I wasn't afraid to work because I'd worked as a laborer. And so I was told that if you just see enough people, talk to enough people, you'll make sales. So I used to run from place to place so I could be rejected more often. And I wasn't making any sales. And all I knew to do was to see as many people as possible and talk as much as possible. So it was run, run, talk, talk. Run, run, talk, talk, and then no, no. And I used to run from place to place, and I would talk as much as possible, and people would say no. I didn't mind if they looked at their watches, but it's when they looked at their watches and started hitting their watches like So finally I did something which changed my life, and it brings us to being together tonight. I went and asked a top salesman, I said, what are you doing differently from me? How come you're making so many sales? He's selling the same product. He's selling it out of the same office. He's selling to the same people. He's selling it at the same price. And he's selling 5 times and 10 times as much as me. And I didn't know much about selling at that time. And he said, well, show me your presentation. And I said, my what? Your sales presentation. I said, you show me yours and I'll show you mine. And so he said, well, a presentation is a logical and orderly method of separating prospects from suspects, identifying their needs, making a presentation, asking their questions, and getting them to take action. I couldn't believe it. It's like I had been pushing a telephone, you know, trying to get through, and I was just pushing numbers randomly, and nobody was answering. All right, I wasn't getting through, and he told me there's a logical sequence to selling, which we'll talk about in a little while. Well, instead of talking all the time, I went out and I began asking questions, and people responded to me differently. And then I began to craft and design questions, and people responded to me differently, and I started to make sales. And then I asked him other questions. Well, what do you say when someone says this? And how do you deal with this objection? And how do you get them to take action when they want to think it over? And, well, all the answers have been found. All the answers to all our questions have been found, and I took answers from him, and I began to ask other people, and then I began to read books on selling. I didn't know there were any books on selling. You know, there's over 4,000 books on selling. There's 2 books on selling published every week, 2 main books and probably 5 other books. And you know that most salespeople have never read a book on selling? I couldn't believe it. I went down to the bookstore and there were books on selling. So I began to buy them, and I would get up every morning and I would read for an hour in selling, and I'd take notes and I'd think of how I could use this, and I'd go out and I'd try it out that day. And that night I'd review how did it work. And if it worked well, then I would do more of it. If it didn't work well, I would stop it or modify it, or sometimes I'd combine this idea with one idea and I had something that worked even better. And then I began to listen to audio programs on selling. I thought I had died and gone to heaven. I had no idea there was so much good information on audio programs. Do you know how many people who have become rich just listening to audio programs in their car when they drive around or when they walk around? Those days, I didn't have a car, but I had one of those Sony cassette players that you could carry around your neck like a purse, and it had a little earphone, and I'd go around like this, listening to it like this, and I'd get up in the morning and I'd play it, and I played it, and I memorized. I spent hours. I memorized the words. Interesting thing, my programs here, this program, Psychology of Selling, is the best-selling audio program on sales in the world. More people have become millionaires listening to it than any other program, according to some of the studies, follow-up studies. People tell me they listen to that program over and over again until they remember all the words. And then when they're with a customer, and the customer says something, the words just fall up. And they tell me, I made the sale because I remembered the words. The words had been stored away. They're part of your thinking. Just like your language. You speak a language, you don't have to grasp for a word because the word's programmed in. The correct answers are programmed in. Well, I listened to programs, this is long before I ever produced my own programs, and I remembered the words, and my sales went up and up and up, and my sales kept going up, and soon I began to go to seminars and courses. I began to travel great distances to go to seminars and sit in front and learn from other people and practice what they learned. Now let me give you an interesting point. Successful people have been studied at great length for many years, and their behaviors have been observed. What do successful people do that's different from other people? One of the things that we find is that successful people, all of them, are very action-oriented. In other words, if they get an idea, they move quickly on it. If they learn something new, they try it out. Now people say, well, what if it doesn't work? Well, if it doesn't work, find out quickly. There's a rule that says try quickly and fail fast. Because the only two things can happen if you take action on a new idea. What are they? What are the two things? This is not a trick question. I'll tell you if it's a trick question. It's not a trick question. Well, it can work, and if it works, it tells you do more of that. Or if it doesn't work, it gives you feedback, and you either stop doing it or you modify it until it does work. But the wonderful thing is that you can't lose by trying something new. So if you were to take successful people, and there's many studies that have been done on this, if you could only look at them through a window and look at a group of people, look through the window, you could tell who the successful people are because they're always in motion. They're always trying more things. They're always active. Unsuccessful people are always waiting for everything to be just right. It's like waiting for a bus on a street where no buses go. They're still waiting. Where the bus? The bus never comes. Successful people are always taking action. So if all you do is just take more action, just get busier, you'll be more successful. By the way, I'm not going to talk about it today, but does everybody here want to be lucky? Would you like to be lucky? Say yes. Okay. You know, it's a very, very important part of Chinese culture is luck, good fortune. Isn't that true? That's why we like jade. Why do we like jade? Because jade signifies luck. Okay. Now, I studied this for many years, and what I found is that it's not luck, it's what we call the law of probabilities. The law of probabilities says that if you flip a coin, the probabilities are 50% it will come down heads or tails, okay? The law of probability says that if you drive home, there's a certain probability that everything will happen. If you drive home, there's a very high probability you'll be safe, but there's a small probability you'll have an accident. In life, when you get married, there's a probability you'll be successful and happy. There's a probability that you won't. All life insurance, all insurance is based on probabilities. It's based on statistics, okay? So, how do you make your own luck? The way you make your own luck is you try more things. It's very simple. It's like life is a great game of darts, okay? Now, if you only throw one dart at the board, your chances of hitting a bullseye are very, very small because of the law of probabilities. But if you throw dart after dart after dart after dart after dart at the board, what must you eventually do? First of all, even if you're an idiot, you'll eventually hit the board. And if you keep throwing darts, and you keep throwing darts one after another, even if you're an idiot, you will sooner or later hit a bullseye. Isn't that true? So you look at successful people, and one of the things we find about successful people is that they're just average people who try more things. They just try more things. They're more active. They make more calls. In selling, we make more calls. And in life, we just try more things. Now, here's an interesting thing. If you throw darts, how many times will you miss the bullseye? Most of the time. Most of the things you try won't work. The fact is that successful people fail far more than unsuccessful people. In other words, if you throw lots of darts, you're going to miss most of the time. But you don't focus on the misses. As a matter of fact, here's a rule. If you could throw 10 darts and be absolutely guaranteed that 9 would fail, try 9 different things in life, make 9 calls, and be absolutely guaranteed that 9 out of 10 calls that you make, 90%, would fail completely, but 1 would be a big hit. If you could be guaranteed of a 90% failure rate with a 1% success rate, what would that mean? It means you'd be one of the most successful people alive. Isn't that true? Because then all you have to do is say, whoa, let's start, because, in other words, increase the probabilities. And then people say, boy, you're sure lucky. No, I'm not lucky. I just saw more people. I just tried more things. Now, every time you learn something new, it's like throwing another dart. Every time you read a book, listen to a tape, come to a course like this, it's like adding more darts to your bag, so you have more darts to throw. And so an average person who's got more darts to throw will be more successful than a genius who's got very few darts to throw. So it's really important. Well, and I'm getting off the track, but you can make your own luck by simply throwing more darts, by trying more things, by doing what you're doing tonight, by coming here. And my job is to give you a whole bunch of darts, okay? Because the law is that if you try enough things, you will be a big success. If you try enough things, because human beings are learning organisms. In other words, we're always learning from our experiences. We're learning at a conscious level and even at an unconscious level. But you cannot help but learn. You're just learning all the time. So even if you're trying things and you're failing, you're still learning at a very fast rate. In fact, you learn more and faster from failure than from anything else. Nobody really learns much from success. But from failure, you get real smart. Like burning your hand. you learn very fast. Okay, there's a story I have to tell you. It's up in Montana, in California, in the United States. In Montana, they raise a lot of sheep in Montana. And this fellow has a sheep ranch that he got from his father. And the city starts to expand out, and they buy out his sheep ranch to build houses. So he sells the land, and he makes a big profit. And he decides that he'll go down to Los Angeles, which is a long way. It's like going from here to Bangkok. He'll go down to Los Angeles. He'll go to the big city. He's never been to the big city before in his whole life, but he wants to go to the big city and see it now that he has all this money. He's always been on this farm raising sheep. Well, he buys a plane ticket, gets onto the plane, he's sitting there, and he's sitting next to a businessman. The businessman's working away. He's got a computer working away, and he feels a little bit awkward because he's just a farm boy. And this businessman's working away, and he's kind of crossing his legs like this, and he crosses his legs, and he notices there's 2 sheep turds in his cuff. And he goes, and he reaches down, and he picks them up. He's got them in his hand like this, and he doesn't know what to do. He feels kind of embarrassed, and he's looking around, and the businessman says, "What do you got?" He says, "What?" He said, "What do you got in your hand?" He said, "Nothing." He said, "Come on, what do you got?" He said, "Well, they're pills." He said, "Well, what kind of pills are they?" He said, "Well, they're smarten up pills." He said, "Smarten up pills." He said, "Yes, I'm going to Los Angeles for a big business meeting, and I always take a couple of smarten up pills with me, so I'm really smart when I go to my meeting." The guy says, "Well, I'm going to a big meeting, and I need something like that too. Give me one of those pills." And he said, "Well, I don't think you'd like it." He said, No, come on, you got 2 of them. Give me one. I really need it. I've got a big meeting coming up." He said, "Well, all right." So he gives him one, about this big. Guy takes it, goes. He said, "That tastes like a sheep turd." He said, "See, you're getting smarter already." Well, our goal today is for you to get smarter throughout the day. Anyway, so I began asking these questions. Why are some people more successful than others? And let me make sure we get this. Okay. And what I learned was the law of cause and effect. Now, the law of cause and effect is the great law of life. It basically says that there's a reason for everything. Everything happens for a reason. That success is not an accident. Failure is not an accident. If you want to be successful, happy, financially independent, if you want to achieve all your goals, it's not luck. It's not an accident. What you do is you find someone else who at one time did not have the effect that you want. You decide what you want. You find someone else who didn't have it, and you find out what they did to get it, and you do it over and over again until you get the same result. And it's not an accident. Well, when I learned this, it changed my life. You mean if I do what other successful people do, I'll get the same results that other successful people get? Answer is yes. You mean if I find out what top salespeople do, and I do the same thing until I master it, I'll get the same results as top salespeople? I'll make the same money? I'll have the same cars? Yes. So I went out and I did it, and it worked. I couldn't believe it. And I'm not as good a salesperson as many people here. Many people here are better salespeople than me, but I learned the cause and effect relationships. I learned that selling is like cooking. There's recipes for selling. There's formulas. And if you follow them, and by the way, they've spent $20-30 million in the last few years videotaping 55,000 sales calls and watching the calls and reviewing the videotapes and having people sit in the back taking notes. And they interviewed the salespeople before the sales call and afterwards, and they interviewed the customers before the sales call and afterwards. And if the customer decided to buy, they asked them, and they played the video, at what point did you decide to buy? If the customer decided not to buy, they asked, why did you decide not to buy? And they did this with 55,000 calls, and they began to draw cross correlations, and they found that every sale follows an exact process, and it follows an exact process in the customer's mind. And that if you sell the way the customers buy, you'll sell 5 and 10 times as much as you sell today. The reason that we don't sell is because we sell differently from the way the customer buys. It's the same as if I was to speak to you in German, or you were to speak to me in Chinese. I mean, it would be like using a different language that we don't understand. So what I found was that if you do what other successful salespeople do, based on the exhaustive research, your sales go up. And I tried it, and sales went up. And you could take people, I took people off the street who'd never sold anything in their lives, and I said, here's the system. And these are sometimes the very best salespeople of all, because they don't have any ideas or fixed ideas. So I said, just do it this way. Say these words, do it this way, say these words, do it this way. And they did, and their sales went like that. And they went past people who'd been selling for 5 and 10 years. I cannot tell you how many young people, guys out of school, women out of school, just starting in sales, never sold before, began to use these methods and became superstars in their fields. Because they didn't have any old ideas about the way things were supposed to be done. They just said, okay, they just did it that way. And their sales, and people said, well, you're just lucky. You're just lucky. You just got into it at the right time. I had a woman in my course who was really neat. She came to me a year and a half later. She came back to the seminar I was at. She said, you're not going to believe it. I was in your seminar 18 months ago, and I had just started in real estate, and you said to set goals for how much you want to earn. So I set a goal to make $100,000 in the next year. Well, I didn't know that the average first-year earning for a real estate person was $18,000. Nobody told me that. So I set a goal of $100,000. Then I just did what you said to do, and I made $104,000 in my first year and became #1 in the company. And they said, how did you do that? I said, well, do what? Make so much money. Well, is that a lot of money? She didn't know that was a lot of money for a first year. She had just written it down, and then she just did what other successful people did. So the law of cause and effect is what changed my life. And by the way, I've been in many different businesses now. I've consulted for more than 500 companies over the years, over the last 20 years. And in every case, I ask them, how does your business work? What are the cause and effect relationships? And where's it strong? Where's it weak? What's working? What's not working? Where are the places where we can gain advantage? Where are the places where we're losing money, and so on? And they think it's miraculous when I come in with this advice, which I charge them a lot of money for. Okay, so what I learned was this, is that there is a mental application. By the way, of all physical laws, there's mental applications. This is more important than anything else. It's that thoughts are causes. Thoughts are causes, and conditions are effects. Thoughts are causes, thoughts are causes, and conditions are effects. That means your thoughts create the effects of your life. Is that your thought is creative. You're almost like a magician in your own life. You create your world by the way you think. And the interesting thing is, it's not the way you thought yesterday or the way you might think tomorrow. It's the way you think at this minute, at this moment. It's the way you think in the now that determines your life. And your thoughts are constantly creating your world on a forward basis. The wonderful thing about our society, a free society like Singapore, is that at any given time you can draw a line under the past and you can say, that was the past, but this is how I'm going to think in the future. And your whole life, just like turning the wheel of a car, goes in a different direction. If you change your thinking, you change your life. And when I learned this, you mean your outer world merely reflects your thoughts? Your outer world is merely an image of your inner world? Is that you keep attracting into your life people and circumstances in harmony with your thinking? Is that everything you have in your life you've created by the way you think? And that if you don't like anything, you can change the way you think and attract something different? Yes, all of that's possible. And once you learn that, you realize there's only one thing in the universe over which you have complete control. What is that? You only control one thing in the world. What is it? You can control your thinking. You can't control other things. You can't control the traffic, and you certainly can't control the weather, but you can control your thinking. And that's enough, because if you will control your thinking, you control the whole world. Singapore is a tribute to human thinking. Singapore is merely an external expression of the very best thinking that has gone into building this country. This country is based on mind power. It's the most amazing thing. Look at these beautiful hotels and convention centers and office buildings. I mean, these are mental. These were mental before they were physical. Are you with me so far? It's really important to understand that. It's kind of an overwhelming thought. I had a hard time with it when I was in my early 20s. You mean my life, which was not that great, has been created by myself? Yes, it's been created by myself. So I said, well, then I'm going to start to get my thinking in harmony with what I want, rather than keep thinking the old crummy thoughts. All right, so thoughts are causes, conditions are effects. Now what this means And it brings us to the great law, which is the foundation of all religion and all philosophy, is that you become what you think about most of the time. You become what you think about most of the time. This is the underlying principle of all religions, all philosophy, all psychology, all success, all metaphysics. Everything is you become what you think about most of the time. So the question is, what do you think about most of the time? By the way, this law is always true, except there are a couple of exceptions. If there weren't exceptions, then every young man would turn into a young woman by the age of 20. But nonetheless, you do become what you think about most of the time. Now, by the way, one of my subjects when I was poor is I began to study self-made millionaires. Self-made millionaires are people who start with zero and within one working lifetime pass the $1 million mark. Now, it's a little bit easier in Singapore. Maybe it's a little harder. But we're talking about U.S. dollars. But the way your currency is going, it's going to be the same pretty soon, isn't it? I remember the old days. I remember the old exchange rate. But here's the point. Is I studied self-made millionaires. These are people who started with nothing. They started with no money and maybe limited education. Sometimes they were brand new immigrants. Sometimes they couldn't speak the language, and they made more than $1 million. So tens of thousands of them have been studied over the years to find out what they do differently. And wouldn't that be a good thing to know, by the way? Say yes. I mean, if you want to be a self-made millionaire, I can promise you this. If you don't know how they think, you can't make it. In other words, if you want to go somewhere but you don't have a map, you can't get there. So I began to study them, and I found, what do you think self-made millionaires think about most of the time? They think about becoming financially independent. Because financial independence to them is very important. They want to reach the point where they don't have to worry about money. After that, they will spend. What do you think poor people think about all the time? They think about how little money they have and think about spending everything they have. And everything they can borrow or put on credit cards. So self-made millionaires are always thinking in terms of financial independence. Poor people are always thinking about how poor they are. Now, if you want to become a self-made millionaire, starting point is begin thinking about financial independence. And I'll talk about this in just a second. So, go back to my question. What is it that successful people think about most of the time? Come on, this is real simple, but it's really important. What is it they think about most of the time? Success? You're right. They think about what they want most of the time and how to get it. Now, these are the two turning points in your life. Think about what you want and how to get it. What is it that you really, really want, and how do you get it? And that's what they think about most of the time. And if you think about what you want most of the time, you start to move toward it, and it starts to move toward you. If you think about how you can get it and what you can do to move faster toward it, you begin to see all kinds of ideas. You all know these things about the brain, but the fact is, if you plant an idea in your brain, you suddenly start to see all kinds of possibilities to achieve the idea. Successful people are successful because they think and talk about what they want. Unsuccessful people are unhappy because they think and talk about what they don't want. They think and talk about the people they're mad at and their bad experiences and their bad luck and their bad job and just shut up. They whine and cry about their situation, but successful people are thinking about what they want and how to get it most of the time. Now, in a University of Pennsylvania study, they put together millions and millions of dollars, and over a 22-year period, they studied 350,000 salespeople all over the country. And they interviewed them to find out what they thought about most of the time and how they thought about things most of the time. Now, this is a very important point, by the way. It's what you think about, the thought itself, multiplied times the emotion, how you think about it, equals the result. Here's an important point. If you think about money, but you think that people who have money are no good, you'll always be poor. One of the things I tell people is never criticize successful people. When people have a lot of money, don't say, well, yeah, I'd rather be happy than rich. Well, I've got news for you. The rich are very happy. People don't realize it, it's a little thing, it's very common in society, in all societies, to criticize successful people, to try to pull them down. But I've got some news for you. It doesn't hurt them at all if you criticize them. But it ruins, it destroys all your hopes for success. When you criticize successful people, you drive success out of your life. You develop a negative force field of energy around yourself that repels success experiences. You actually shoot yourself in your own foot, bang, and go around telling everybody what a good shot you are. So don't ever criticize successful people. Admire successful people. Look up to successful people. Are successful people perfect? No. Are you perfect? No. So therefore, don't expect successful people to be perfect. Just look at what they've done to be successful, and if there's something you can learn, learn it. Read their books, listen to their tapes, go to their courses, but don't ever get into conversations criticizing people just because they're successful, because it hurts you. It doesn't hurt them at all. It destroys your possibilities. And as you know, in society, it becomes very common that people who are successful are pulled down and attacked and so on. Stay away from that, because that's how losers think. And so the emotion is the critical thing. Well, they interviewed 350,000 salespeople, and they tracked them over a series of years. What is your name, sir? Walton? Okay. So they say, let's say, Walton, would you join this experiment with us? What we're going to do is we're going to phone you on an irregular basis. Every few days, somebody will phone you, and they'll just ask you, what are you thinking about right now? And whatever it is, just tell them what you're thinking about at that moment, okay? So they would do this experiment with all of us. They hire university students to do this. They give them free beer and pizza, for which university students will do anything, okay? And then what they would do is they would just phone Walton, and every so often, someone would say, Walton, that fellow's on the phone for you. Okay, tell him I'm thinking about this proposal for a customer, or I'm thinking about getting this sale closed by the end of the week, or I'm thinking about this course that I'm going to. So Walton would just tell what he's thinking about, and then they tracked that over a period of months and years, and then compared income. And they found an interesting thing. A pattern began to emerge. Is the highest paid salespeople had a particular thinking pattern that was different from the lowest paid salespeople. And they found that it was consistent. Now, they found there was one quality that top salespeople have more than any other single quality. It's the highest quality of all, and it was kind of predictive of success. It actually predicts success in life more than any other single thinking quality. Can you guess what it is? Go ahead. Can't be wrong. Don't worry. Don't be shy. Can you guess what's the most important quality to predict success and happiness in life? Belief is good. That's part of it. There's no wrong answers. I'll tell you what the answer is, okay? It's optimism. What they found was that successful people had really high levels of optimism. They were really optimistic. They were positive most of the time. Does that mean they didn't have problems? Oh, they had far more problems than the average person because they tried more things. They found that optimists had two great qualities that made them great in selling, which led to their success. Number one was they tried more things, they made more calls, because they had an unrealistic expectation that they would be successful. They just kind of believed they would be successful. You said believe? Yeah, they believed if they just kept on, they would be successful. So they just tried more things. Now the second quality they had is they persisted more, because they have an unrealistic expectation that if they just persist more, they'll succeed. Do you know that the average sale today is closed after 6 visits with the customer? 5.8 to 6 visits. That's how long it takes to make a sale today. But once you've made the sale, sometimes you can keep that customer for years. And every subsequent sale takes you 1/10 of the time of the first sale. Is that all highly paid salespeople have persisted until they got the sale, and then they keep that customer year after year after year, and they make more and more sales, and they get referrals from that customer? Are you with me so far? So therefore, optimists try more things, they make more calls, and they persist longer, and gradually they begin to build up their sales, they begin to build up their customer base, and years go by, and they're 5 and 10 times as successful as people who make fewer calls and quit earlier. Are you with me so far? So this is pretty logical stuff. You think, well, obviously, if a person is positive and they make lots of calls and they call back, they're probably going to make more sales than a person who doesn't, right? In other words, they're creating their own luck. They're putting the law of probabilities on their side. So optimists make more calls and try more often, or call back more often. But we also find that optimists have a particular way of thinking in several different areas, and that's what I want to talk about between now and the break. I can spend a whole day on this, but I know that you guys are really smart, so you could take a lot of good ideas in a short period of time. Is that right? Say yes. Yes. Okay. So what optimists do, oh, damn, I love this stuff. Okay. What optimists do, what time do we start? We start at 7, 8, 9, 10, 10. Okay. What optimists have is what I call orientations. Now, an orientation is a particular way of thinking about life and the world. And the first orientation that optimists have is future orientation. Now, future orientation is what made Singapore a great nation state. Future orientation means that optimists idealize. Optimists think about the future most of the time. They think about where they're going most of the time. They think about the possibilities of the future, and they idealize. They kind of imagine, what would my future look like if it was fantastic? What would the world look like? What would my world look like? And there's 4 areas where optimists idealize. These are the 4 things that we all want in common. All over the world, all human beings want these 4 things. Number 1 is great health. We want to have great health. We want to feel good about ourselves. We want to have high levels of energy. We want to live forever, right? And it's never been possible to live longer and live better than it is today, right here. Number 2 is that optimists want to have loving relationships. They want to have happy relationships. They want to have happy families. They want to have happy friends. They want to work with people they like, work for bosses they like. They want to sell to customers they like, and so on. One of the great rules for success in selling is only get into a business where you really like the people you're working with and you really like the people you sell to. I had a woman come up to me recently. She said, I really like my product and I really like my company, but I really hate the people I sell it to. I mean, they're real jerks. She just didn't like the people. I said, you'll never be successful unless you really care about the people you're selling to. Well, the third thing that we all want is we all want to do meaningful work, and we all want to do it well. It's so important for us to do our work well, because this is what we found, is how much you like yourself, your level of self-esteem, determines your level of optimism. If you really like yourself, if you really feel happy about yourself, you'll do your work better. But the flip side is also true. It's like a coin. If you do your work well, you like yourself more. And if you like yourself more, you do your work better. And each time you learn something new that enables you to do your work better, you like yourself more. And then when you do your work better, you get better rewards and better feedback, and you like yourself more. And the more you like yourself, the better you do. And the better you do, the more you like yourself. Say, I like myself. Now say it like you mean it. Say, I like myself. I like myself. Wonderful. Do you know, all top people can say that quite happily. They did a study of 1,500 men and women who were at the tops of every one of their fields. It was a 9-year study. And they asked them, what is the greatest of all benefits of success? And you know what they said? It was wonderful feelings of self-esteem. They liked themselves. They liked themselves. They genuinely liked themselves and felt that they had done something important with their lives. Felt they had done something worthwhile with their lives. So therefore, a high level of self-esteem leads to self-confidence. It leads to optimism. It leads to a positive mental attitude. And the more you like yourself, the more you like other people. And the more you like other people, the more they like you and they want to buy from you and recommend you to their friends. So everything you do to build yourself up psychologically improves every part of your life. The more you like yourself, the better a parent you are, the better a spouse you are, the better a friend you are, the better a boss you are. The more you like yourself, the better is every part of your life. The more you like yourself, the lower your stress levels. The more you like yourself, the stronger is your immune system. The more you like yourself, the healthier you are. People with high self-esteem are very seldom sick. People with high self-esteem do their work well. They have lots of energy. People with high self-esteem set big goals for themselves. It's an interesting thing. If you really like yourself, you set big goals for yourself. And if you set big goals for yourself, and you also persist. So the more you like yourself, the better you do. And the wonderful thing is every single time that you do something positive for yourself or for anyone else, your self-esteem goes up. Now, this brings us back to future orientation. People who really like themselves think about the future, and they have great ideas for the future. Do you know that we have found that just the very idea... I'm sorry, let me not get ahead of myself. I said there's 4 things we want. Number 1 is health and energy. Number 2 is loving relationships. Number 3 is meaningful work that we do well. Number 4 is financial independence. We all want to be financially independent. Now, we all judge ourselves in life by how well we're doing on each of these 4. And we could be doing well in 3, but if we're low in 4, that's what bothers us. That's the thing that worries us more than anything else. You know, you could have great health and good family and nice job and be broke. And you know what? You won't think about the other 3 things. You think about being broke all the time. Isn't that true? It's called the deficiency need in psychology. We always tend to think about where our deficiencies are and not pay enough attention to the other. Well, the more you like yourself, the more you idealize your future, the more you create great dreams of what is possible for you. And the starting point of of dreaming great dreams is to have a fantasy or an imaginary idea of your life as if it were perfect sometime in the future. So when I do personal strategic planning, when I do strategic planning actually with corporations, the first thing I say is, let us imagine that this company 5 years in the future is perfect in every way. Okay? If this company was perfect, if it was a great company, if it was the most respected company in the business, if it was the best company of all in this industry, what would it look like? And then I go around and I have the executives give me an idea. What would it look like? Best products, best service, great customers, tremendous management, wonderful people, great systems internally, wonderful reputation, high profitability, rapid growth rates, high price on the stock exchange. We write them all down. And the most amazing thing is, I say, okay, now, is this what the company would look like if it was perfect? And everybody says, yeah, if this company was perfect, that's what it would look like. I would say, okay, is this possible? Are these possible? And you know, everybody stops. I do this with the senior executives of multi-billion-dollar corporations. And they say, yeah, 5 years? Not in 1 year, but yeah, we could do that in 5 years. And so the only question then becomes what? How? How will we do it? I say, good. Now let's start talking about how. Let's first of all organize these in priority. If we could only accomplish one, which would be the first one? And then which would be the second? And so the first one, you know what the first one is usually? Superb products and services. Because if you have that, you'll have the sales, you'll have the profits, you'll have the market, you'll attract the people and so on. So, okay, now, how do we develop a reputation as being the best in the business? There's a reason that I talked about this, because you need to say the same thing. If your life was perfect in 5 years, if your health was perfect and your family was perfect and your work was perfect and your financial situation was perfect in 5 years, what would it look like? What would it look like? And then you begin to think, hey, in 1 year maybe, but in 5 years, I could be fit, I could have a great family, I could be the top of my field in my work, I could be financially independent or on my way to financial independence. All that's possible within 5 years. Isn't that true? Now, here's an interesting point. Are you ready? The time is going to pass anyway. The 5 years is going to go past anyway. You know, 5 years from now, 5 years will have gone by. You'll be 5 years older. The only question is, what are you going to do in the meantime? Well, here's my favorite word in success. My favorite word in success is the word clarity. I am a fanatic on the word clarity. And basically, what I say is you can't hit a target that you can't see. So your job is to be absolutely clear if your life was perfect. If you're married, sit down with your spouse and create what is called a dream list. And just say, these are our dreams for the future. And just write down everything you'd like to have in your life if you had no limits. If you had the power to achieve anything. If you could wave a magic wand over your life and have 3 wishes, what 3 wishes would you want? Health, happiness, money, financial independence. Here's the point. If you could dream it, you can do it. If you can write it down, if you can imagine it and write it down, then the only question you ask is, how? You say, how do we do it? And then what you do is you say, now who else has got what I want? And who else at one time didn't have it and now they have it? And what you do is you go and find out how they got there. You read their books, you ask them questions, you listen to their programs, and then you discipline yourself to do the same things they did until you get the same result. It's not a miracle. Success is not, there's just far too many successful people in Singapore who've started with nothing for it to be luck or an accident or a miracle. There's a system going on here. Like somebody's got the phone number and they're getting through on a regular basis. Your job is to find out the phone number. My daughter is going out with a young man, and his father is a lawyer. The lawyer is a corporate lawyer, and they set up they did all the papers for a restaurant. And the founder of this restaurant was very arrogant. He said, this is going to be the best restaurant in Los Angeles. This restaurant is going to be so good, we're not going to advertise this restaurant, and we're not even going to have the phone number in the book. In fact, this restaurant is going to be so good that people are going to keep the phone number. And the only way that you can get a reservation is if you know the phone number. And so you'll have to know somebody who knows the phone number. And you know something? Within 1 year, that restaurant was packed. And you could only get a reservation if you had the phone number. And so you'd be saying, do you know the phone number to that restaurant? Well, yes, I do. Could I have it? Well, I'm not sure. And so people who had the phone number were very jealous about this phone number, and they were very careful giving out the phone number, and they went there on a regular basis. I mean, he made it one of the most successful restaurants in Los Angeles. To this day, you can't get in unless you know the phone number. Now, when we talk about being financially successful, scoring a 10 in all 4 of those areas, you've got to figure out the phone number. You've got to get the phone number. Now, fortunately enough, the phone number is not a secret, as like this one was. The phone number is all around you. The phone number is here tonight, but the phone number is all around you. Your job is to get the phone number. So clarity is the critical thing. Decide what you want. Decide clearly what you want. Talk about it. Think about it. Imagine it. Play with it. Like a child at Christmas time. Fantasize about a beautiful home, a beautiful car, travel, health, so on. All of these things are possible for you, but you have to have them in your mind first. Remember, it always begins within your mind and then it goes into your reality. Now, the second part is, I love this stuff. Damn. Okay. The second orientation that successful people have is goal orientation. Now, goal orientation means that they have very clear written goals that they work on every single day. So I'm going to give you a homework exercise. If we had more time, I would take you through the exercise here. We may do this at a later seminar, but what I want you to do is I want you to take a piece of paper like this when you get home tonight. I want you to promise me you'll do this. If you'll do this, I promise you it will have a major impact on your life. No exceptions. Take a piece of paper like this, write the word goals at the top, and write down at least 10 goals you want to accomplish in the next 12 months. Before you go to bed tonight, this is your homework assignment. Go home, sit down, write down the 10 goals. You promise me you'll do that? Say yes. Yes. Even if you're lying, some of you would say like this. I'm not saying anything. I ain't writing no goals. Might work. You know, it might get me out of my rotten old broken down car, my crummy job. I ain't writing down no goals. It might take 3 minutes of my life. I'm not doing it. Now here's the important point. Writing down these goals takes 2 to 3 minutes. Actually about 3. If you write down 10 things that you want to accomplish in the next 12 months. Now all you have to do then is take this piece of paper, fold it up, put it away somewhere where you won't see it for a whole year. You know, like in your Bible or something like that. Take it, put it away for a whole year, and at the end of the year you take out this list and open it up, and you'll be both happy and sad. You'll be happy because 8 of your 10 goals will have been accomplished in the most amazing ways. And you'll be sad because you'll wish you had written more goals and bigger goals. Now, does this work? Yes, it works everywhere. Has anybody ever done this, by the way, written down 10 goals? Everybody ever done it? Does it work? Everybody will tell you it works. People go home, and managers go home and have all the staff sit down and write down 10 goals. Parents go home and have their kids write down 10 goals, or have their spouse write down 10 goals, and their whole lives change. Now, it's not that it takes at the end of 12 months, suddenly, bing, you achieve the goals. The goals start to come true at a rate that is absolutely amazing. People come to me and they say, my whole life has changed in the last 30 days. All kinds of things have happened. They've changed jobs. They've changed relationships. They've gotten a new house. They bought a car. They've taken a trip. And they're all things they wrote down. So your homework assignment is to write down 10 goals. And you can write down more if you like. Before I came over here, I'm staying at the hotel across, I wrote down my 10 goals. I do it every single day. I just write them and rewrite them. I carry a school notebook, a spiral notebook with me, and I just write down my goals every day. Because that just burns them deeper and deeper and deeper into my subconscious mind. And it's the most amazing thing. It costs you 3 to 5 minutes a day, but the power on your life is phenomenal. If all you'll do from this day is you write down 10 goals, and then instead of putting them away for a year, just review them on a regular basis. And the only question you ask is what? How? How can I achieve the goals? How? The question how makes you an optimist. The question how raises your self-esteem. The question how unlocks your creativity. The question how makes you powerful. When you look at your goals and say, okay, I can have these. I can have more money, better health, greater travel. I can do all these things. Good. The only question is how. But here's the interesting thing, is that even if you didn't do these things, I had a man come up to me at a seminar recently, And he said, Brian, he said, I was at your seminar 6 months ago. He said, you gave that exercise about writing the 10 goals, and while you were talking, I was so excited, I wrote down 18 goals. And then I took the list home, I did what you told me, and I hid it. He said, I hid it so well, I couldn't find it again. Now, he said, the interesting thing was, I took the list from the seminar, I folded it up, took it home, and hid it. I didn't even look at it again. 2 weeks later, I moved to a new house. And when I was unpacking, I found the list. And I opened the list, and he said, I had to sit down to read it. He said, 11 of the 18 goals had been achieved in 5.5 months. One was to get a better job, which I had. One was to earn more money. I'm making more than I ever made. One was to get a new car. The new car came with the job. One was to get a new house. I just moved into the house because I could afford it. One was to lose weight. One was to take a trip. One was to learn a subject. One was to fix a relationship. But he said these were life goals, and I'd accomplished 11, and I'd almost accomplished 4 more. He said, in less than 6 months. And I lost the list. See, the interesting thing is when you write down the goals, writing a goal down actually programs it into your subconscious mind. So even if your conscious mind doesn't even remember the list, your subconscious mind's got it now, and it works 24 hours a day to bring it into your life. Please trust me on this. It's life transforming. And I've spoken all over the world and given this exercise. I've never had anybody say it didn't work. The only things they say are, it was incredible. The results on their lives were explosive. They could not believe it. So will you give it a try? Say yes. Yes. Okay, I'm trusting you. I'm coming over to your house tonight. You know, I'm going to wake up. You're going to hear that banging on the door. Bang, bang, bang. Show me the list. No list? We'll have to have a talk. Okay, so goal orientation. Now, the third orientation is excellence orientation. In order to achieve something you have never achieved before, you have to be good at something you've never been good at before. You have to develop skills you've never had before. So remember, your job, and I've got some good news and more good news. When you come into this room, you are automatically in the top 10% of people in our society. You're in the top 10% of adults, and I'll tell you why. Only 10% of people ever come to a seminar like this. Now, the 10% of people who come to a seminar like this are automatically optimists. Nobody came here hoping this would be a bad seminar. If you did, I'll talk to you later. You're future-oriented because you came here to learn something that will help you to be better in the future. Even if you didn't define it that way, nonetheless, in your own heart, you were future-oriented. And that's all that matters. You're goal-oriented because you came here. You had to pay for this seminar. You had to turn off the television. You had to make your way down here, find a parking space, get in here. You're goal-oriented. You're aiming for a target, which means that you're already not in just the top 10%, probably in the top 3% of our population in terms of the future. Now remember, here's one of the great rules for success. It doesn't matter where you're coming from. All that really matters is where you're going. It doesn't matter where you're coming from. All that matters is where you're going. Now your job is, now that you're in the top 10% mentally, and you've got to get there mentally before you get there financially, once you're there mentally, your job is to stay there. Now, this idea of being in the top 10% is a major idea, and let me explain it. When I was growing up, I never thought I could be in the top 10% of anything. I failed in school. I did poorly in school. I got fired from jobs. Try getting fired. I used to pump gas in a gas station. I got fired from that because I wasn't good enough. I got fired from washing dishes. Try getting fired from washing dishes. It doesn't do your self-esteem very much good. I've gotten fired from more jobs than you've had. I mean, it never dawned on me that I could be good at anything. And then I learned something that changed my life. I learned that everybody in the top 10% started where? In the bottom 10%. Everybody who's at the top and doing well was once at the bottom and doing poorly. Everybody who's at the front of the buffet line of life was once at the back of the line. Everybody who's at the top of your field was once not in your field at all. And anything that anyone else has done, you can do as well. It's almost like walking. If I said to you, I will pay you $1 million Singapore dollars if you will walk from here to KL. Physically walk. Now, it doesn't matter how long you take. You can run if you want. But if you will just walk, you cannot take a ride, you have to walk. Now, if I told you, and you believe me, and the $1 million was there, you double-checked, all right? And you get $1 million from walking from here to downtown KL. Is there anybody here who could not do that? Okay. Okay. So we could all do it. Is that correct? Now, is there anybody here who is a runner, a jogger, really fit? Okay? Nobody. Okay? Either that or your arm is too tired from jogging too much. All right. But the point is that some people who are really fit will get there quickly. Boom, 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 boom. They'll do 25, 35 miles a day. Okay? Some people who are not very fit will do 5 or 10 miles a day. Doesn't really matter. Everybody who keeps walking will get there. Are you with me so far? This is an important metaphor. Everybody who keeps walking toward the top 10% gets there. If you keep learning and practicing and trying and reading and listening to audio programs and get associated with other people, if you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, you will get to KL. You will achieve that level of financial income. There's nothing that can stop you except who? Only you can stop you by stopping. And so therefore you find that people who have no advantages at all, but have one, is they just don't stop. They can be a complete idiot. They can have every disadvantage. They can have limited education. They could come from a terrible country with no opportunities. They could have no family and be survivors of a terrible experience, but they just put one foot in front of the other. They get to the front of the line. They get to KL. They get to the top 10%. You can be in the top 10%. So this is what I learned, which changed my life when I was 24 years old and living and passing through Singapore, is that if you make a decision to get into the top 10% and you don't take it back, you will get there. If you'll just do what others have done, you will get there. And it may take a week, it may take a month. Do you know how long it takes to achieve mastery in any profession, including selling? It takes 7 years. Now, many people think, well, I'm going to start in selling, and if I'm not at the top of the field within a month, I'll quit. But it takes 7 years to reach the point where you're in the top 10%. Some people may do it faster, but very seldom. I used to think, hey, I'll do it faster. It took 7 years. It took year after year of working. Now, that doesn't mean that you're broke for 6 years and 11 months and suddenly you make a lot of money. It's a gradual uphill. But the fact is, to get to the point where you're making the kind of money that you're capable of, it will take 7 years. But the time is going to pass anyway. So you might as well be there at the end of the 7 years. Do you know how many people are still here at the end of 7 years? They haven't made any progress because they never put in the extra effort. They never made the decision. They never went for it. So to make a decision, I'm going to be in the top 10%. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there. I'm going to pay the price. I'm going to read the books. I'm going to leave the television off. I'm going to start a little earlier. I'm going to work a little harder. I'm going to stay a little later. I'm going to get better. I am going to get into the top 10%. And you know what? There's nothing to stop you from getting into the top 10%. The only reason people don't get into the top 10% is why? They don't decide to. And if they decide to, they don't get started. And if they get started, they quit. All right? So it's very important. But optimists say, hey, I can be in the top 10%. I can be. And they just never quit. They just keep on going. No matter how much criticism they get, no matter how many problems they have, get fired from their jobs, they have setbacks and difficulties. You just keep walking to KL. Just keep going. They just keep going. And they get there and people say, boy, you're sure lucky. No, you weren't. You make your own luck. You make your own luck by deciding where you're going and getting on the road. Now, I'm going to give you one of the key secrets to success for the rest of your life and share it with other people when they need it. It's one of the great secrets. In our world, in Singapore, we get paid for results. We get paid for getting the job done. Isn't that true? We don't get paid because we're handsome or pretty. Thank heavens. Thank heavens for all of us, right? We get paid because we get a result, because we perform, because we do the job. We do what is expected of us. We contribute value, okay? So, the only way we're going to get to the top 10% is by becoming very good at what we do. There's no shortcuts. We just have to get down and work at it. So, I'm going to ask you to do this. Ask yourself this question. What one skill in your field now, if you were excellent at it, would help you the most? You see, there's 5 to 7 core skills in every job. And it is our top skills that have got us to where we are, but it's our weakest skill that's holding us back. Your weakest skill sets the height of your income. Your weakest skill determines how much money you make. So if there's 7 key skills in selling, which there are, and you're brilliant at 6 of them, but weak at the 7th, that sets your income. So ask yourself, what one skill? It's really important. What one skill? And if you don't know the answer, you must find out. Ask your boss. Boss, what one skill, if I was really good at it, would increase my income the most? Ask your coworkers. Ask your customers. I did that once when I was living in Singapore. I asked one of my customers, what one skill would help me the most? And he told me, if you would stop talking so much and ask questions and listen more, you'd be far more effective. Well, I talk. Salespeople talk too much because we're nervous. We're nervous, so we overcome our nervousness by talking too much. Talk, 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 talk. Men especially. Men are worse at this than anyone else. And the reason we're in selling is because we get along well with other people. We're more social, more sociable than other people. So talk, 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 talk. Anyway, so he said, instead of talking so much, ask more questions and listen, and you'll be more effective. And I did, and he was right. And that helped me an enormous amount. So ask people, what one skill, what one change in what I'm doing would help me more than anything else? And they'll tell you, if you were a superb prospector, if you were so good at prospecting that people were literally coming in the windows with their checks trying to buy from you, if they were lined up in the corridor when you got to work in the morning with their checks saying, me first, if you were such a good prospector that when you phoned, they said, thank heaven you phoned, can I send a car for you? If you were such a good prospector, would that double your income? Say yes. Okay, then set that as a goal. I'm going to be superb at prospecting. And then the only question you ask once you set it as a goal is what? How? How do I become so good at prospecting that I have so many prospects I don't have time to see them all? That becomes your question, right? For the rest of your life, from now on, say, what one skill would help me the most? And it's always the skill where you're the weakest. And then you set it as a goal, and you make a plan, and you work on it every day until you bring that skill up. Now, you may not like it to start off with, and you may not be very comfortable with it, and you may not like prospecting or closing or something else. Well, boo-hoo for you, okay? Get over it and get on with learning how to do it well, right? If you're going to be in this business, you're going to have to master the key skills in this business, right? So don't give yourself excuses. Well, I'm not very good at prospecting. Well, shut up. Who cares what you're good at? The fact is that all business skills are learnable. Okay, say it. All business skills are learnable. If anybody else can learn to be good at prospecting, so can you. The fact that they're good at it is proof that you can be good at it as well. And if you double the number of good prospects you have, what will happen to your sales? They will double. And what will happen to your income? It will double. So let's figure out how to do it. All the optimist says is, how do I do it? What's the way? How do we do? I know it's possible because they're an optimist. You have an unrealistic expectation of success. Sometimes people think that you're smoking something on the side, because you're so positive all the time. But the fact is, anything anyone else has done, you could do. Nobody's better than you. Nobody's smarter than you. Everybody's at the top of their field that once was an idiot. Sometimes those people were at the bottom and people made fun of them and they had no success and they had nothing. Now they're up there and everybody says, ooh, ooh, ooh. Oh. Believe me, anything that anyone else has done, you can do as well. Just make a decision what it is, be absolutely clear, and then set your future, your ideal, set the goal to achieve the ideal, determine the skill that you'll need. Now here's the fourth orientation, and this is really important. It's called growth orientation. Now growth orientation is the key to the future. Lee Kuan Yew said that years ago, is that we have to have the smartest and best educated populace in the world, which Singapore just about damn near does. All right? Because this is a city-state built on brains, and our people have to be smart. We have to be connected to the internet. We have to be fluent in English. We have to be able to deal in the world market. This is brain power. So this whole country has been built on learning. And the key to your success is learning as well. Now, I was asked recently, what are the keys to continuous learning? What is the key to continuous growth? And I said that there's three things. Number one is read on a regular basis.
Reading is to the mind as exercise is to the body. If you don't read, it's like if you don't exercise your muscles, what happens to them? What happens to your muscles if you don't use them? Yeah, they atrophy, they become weak, they become useless. But if you use them, then they're strong and they work for you. They're available to you at all times. It's the same as reading. When you read, it takes total concentration. It activates more brain cells. It works out that muscles. It even amazes your mother-in-law. But you can actually become smarter. Just like you can build muscles by working out, you can actually build brains by reading on a regular basis. So the rule is read 30 to 60 minutes in selling each day, 5 days a week. If you do that, you'll read about a book a week. That'll translate into about 50 books a year. 50 books a year will make you one of the smartest and highest paid people in sales in your field. You'll go past everybody else in the business. I have been giving this advice since I learned it myself, and I've had people come back to me and say that it just was transforming. It was like waving a magic wand. People who were going in circles and frustrated and broke and living on the floor of their friends' homes and had no money began to read an hour a day, and their sales just took off like a flower blooming in the summertime. So, or in any weather. So, read on a regular basis. Now, the second is to attend all the seminars that you can. Be hungry for seminars. Be hungry for learning experiences. Let me ask you, what is the most precious thing that you have in the whole world? Time. It's your time, because your time is your life. So therefore, when you learn something that can help you jump ahead, you save life. You achieve the same goal in a couple of years that somebody else may take 5 or 10 years to achieve. So always trade money for time or life. And if it costs you a little bit to go to a seminar, pay the money, because you'll get it back 10, 20, 50, 100 times in not only increased income, but also in the years that you'll save to get to the same point. I've never met anybody who's gotten ahead who has done it just by standing there and waiting for it to happen. They've become very aggressive about learning. All of the highest paid people in sales are very aggressive about continuing to learn, as you are. So therefore, attend every seminar you can. Keep an eye open. Listen for them. Watch for them. And go to them. Because the return on your investment is 10, 20, 30, 50 times whatever the cost of the seminar is. Now, by the way, my friends here at Success Resources bring in and do the best seminars in the world. This is not a paid advertisement, but they bring in the best speakers and they organize the best seminars in the business. And so, right? Okay. The third thing is to listen to audio programs as you move around. Listen to audio programs on a regular basis. I was here, and my friend may be here, but I was here speaking a few years ago, and a friend of mine came to this seminar. He's a friend now, and he was broke. He was at the bottom of his business. He had started in sales. He had made no sales. He had no money. He was living with his wife in a bedroom in his mother's apartment, and he was at the bottom. He came to this seminar, and I offered a package of audio programs, 6 audio programs. He had no money. But he went home at lunchtime, and he went to his mother-in-law, and he asked her if he could borrow the money. And his mother-in-law loaned him the money. And he came back to the seminar, and he got the audio programs before they sold out, which they always do. 1 year later, he was at the top of his field. 2 years later, he was at the top of his business. 3 years later, he was the youngest person in the world inducted into the $1 Million Roundtable, the top insurance salespeople in the world. He said it totally transformed his life, increased his income 25 times. He said because of audio listening. Now, I'm not trying to influence you in any way. But growth orientation is really critical. It's important. You see, if I were to say to you, here is some stock for a company, would you like to buy some of this stock? Okay? It's a good company. And you looked at it, and you looked at all the material, and you said, no, I don't want to buy any of that stock. What would you be telling me? Well, you'd be telling me that you didn't think that was a good investment, right? People who don't invest in themselves are saying a very, very bad thing. They're saying, I don't think that this is a good person to invest in. This company has no future. This person has no future. The interesting thing is that the more you invest in yourself, the more you believe in yourself, the more you like yourself, the more determined you become, the more confident you become, the better you get. The more you invest in yourself, the more it transforms you. People who don't invest in themselves, surprisingly enough, don't think that they're worth spending any money on. And you know what? Turns out to be true. Because your outer world is a reflection of your inner world. So remember, time is your most precious resource, and your most valuable asset is your earning ability. Your ability to earn money is the most important single factor you have. Your ability to apply your mind to earning money. And the person who earns 100,000 Singaporean and a person who earns 200,000 Singaporean, there's no difference in intelligence, no difference in basic ability. It's just a difference in earning ability. One has upgraded their skills and knowledge so they earn at this level, the other has not. And if you have a choice of 100,000 or 200,000 or 50,000 and 100,000, which should you choose? Take the bigger one, okay? And you have the choice. You just say, okay, I'll take the 100. You take the 50, I'll take the 100. Take the 100, okay? Take the 200. And the key is future orientation, goal orientation, excellence orientation, and growth orientation. Right?
Question. Who is the most important person in this room? You're right. You are the most important person in this room. You are the most important person in your world. This entire universe of billions of planets revolves around you. Nothing else in the world has any meaning except for the meaning you give it. You are the most important person. And as we said before, how important you think you are determines everything that happens to you. If you consider yourself to be an important person, you set bigger goals. If you consider yourself to be a more important person, you persist longer. You set higher standards. You strive for excellence. If you think that you're an important person, you treat other people as though they're important as well. And they treat you as though you're important back. So how important you feel you are, as we said before, your level of self-esteem is the most important statement about you. And the wonderful thing is that the more you practice these principles, the more you think about what you want, the more you plan for it, the more you work toward it, the better you get at your work, the better you feel about yourself, and the more important you feel you are. So you actually build yourself up. Just like if you wanted to become physically fit, you do physical work, you work out with your body. If you want to become mentally fit, you do some of the things we're talking about today. Now, second question is this. What is the most important part of today, this seminar? What's the most important part of the seminar? Not a trick question. The answer is what you do afterwards. You see, it's the actions that you take that make the difference between success and failure. Successful people take action, unsuccessful people don't. Successful people hear something and they move on it. Unsuccessful people hear the same thing and they say, well, I'm going to do something about that someday. And they live in a vacation place called Someday Isle. And they sit there and they sit in the sun and they say, someday I'll read that book. Someday I'll go to that course. Someday I'll make a decision to be one of the best in my field and work at it every day. But they live on Someday Isle and they never do it. So it's really important, if you hear something good, you act on it. Now, I said this morning that the first part we would talk about the psychology of selling. The psychology we've talked about, you become what you think about most of the time. If we asked top salespeople what they think about most of the time, one of the things they think about is selling more stuff. They think about selling all the time. They get up in the morning and they think about selling, and they think about selling all day long. And they think about selling in the evening, and they think about selling on the way home, and they think about selling on the weekend. Now, many people think, well, you know, when I finish work, I don't like to think about my work. Well, that's okay. It just means that you have no future. Because that would be the same as saying, well, when I'm at work, I don't like to think about my family. You know, I like to just sort of leave that as another part of my life. The fact is that your family and you are part 24 hours a day. You think about it all the time. If you're in the right field, you think about it all the time. So then we say, well, what are the things that top salespeople think about in selling? And we talk about the psychology of selling. Now, there's several things we could talk about in the next hour, and I want to talk about some of the most important. Basically, I said there's 7 key parts of selling, 7 key result areas. And the 7 key result areas determine your success or failure. Wherever you're strong, you'll be doing well. Wherever you're weak, it'll be holding you back. And your job is to identify where you're strong and do more of it, and identify where you're weak and bring it up. Okay, it's a real simple process, but it's all you have to do to move to the top of your field is keep working on the skills that are holding you back and keep maximizing the skills that are getting you there. Now, the 7 skills are, number 1 is prospecting. You have to have someone to talk to. Now let's talk about prospecting a little bit. Prospecting, we say that the key to success in selling means spending more time with better prospects. Spend more time with better prospects. Spend more time with people who are more likely to buy. And there is a sales funnel that I want to show you, and the sales funnel is like this. And the rule is that there are three parts of selling. There are prospecting, and that's the first part of the sales funnel. And then the second part is presenting, showing your product. And that's the second part of the funnel. And the third part is following up and closing. So I'll just say follow up and close. And this is phase 3. Now, your job is to keep this hopper full all the time. And the 80-20 rule applies. Spend 80% of your time prospecting and presenting, and only 20% of your time presenting and following up. Spend 80% of your time prospecting and presenting until your hopper is full. Now let us say that this is a ratio of 20 to 5. You have to call on 20 people to get 5 people that you can see personally. And let's say the ratio then, for every 5 people you talk to personally, we have 2 that you can follow up with, and of these 2, 1 turns into a sale. So what is your ratio of calls to sales? It's 20 to 1, okay? You have to see 20 people to make a sale. Now you have 2 jobs from now on. Number 1 is keep the hopper full. Keep the hopper full so that you always have lots of people to talk to. And number 2 is get better at your key skills. Get better at prospecting. Get better at presenting. Get better at following up and closing. A small improvement in your prospecting so that you spend more time with better prospects is going to increase the quality of the people you talk to. A small improvement in presenting is going to increase the number of people you follow up with, and a small improvement in closing will increase your sales, so you can actually go from 20 to 1, where you are today, to 10 to 1 very quickly. If you go from 20 to 1 to 10 to 1, what will happen? You'll double your income. So you must always be looking for ways to prospect better. And I want to tell you an interesting concept about prospecting, and it has to do with high probability prospect versus low probability prospects. I got a question here from Anthony, and Anthony says a very common objection here in Singapore is that the economy is bad. How do we solve this objection? Anybody heard that? The economy is bad? Say yes. Yes. Okay. It's a good reason for not buying, but are people buying food? Are people buying clothes? Are people buying homes? Are people buying cars? Are people buying... Remember, when there's 5% unemployment, there's 95% employment. And so the economy is down a little bit, but the main problem is dealing with poor prospects. So with prospects, you have 2 types. You have what we call high probability prospects and low probability prospects. Now, what is a high probability prospect? Well, it's one that's very close to buying when you meet them. If you sell hamburgers and you meet a person who's really hungry, that's a good prospect. If you sell cars and you meet a person who's looking for a car right now, that's a good prospect. If you're selling life insurance and you meet a person who just had a young child and wants to provide for their future, that's a good prospect. My throat just went dry. It's unbelievable. So the other end of the spectrum is excuse me. The other end of the spectrum is low probability prospects. People are a long, long way from buying. And here's what we know. It's sort of like a thermometer. Is everybody you meet is somewhere in here. Your job is to spend more time with prospects that are up here. So your job is to spend more time with people who can and will buy your product or service in a reasonable period of time. And so at the beginning, you need to sort out prospects from high probability to low probability. So what is a high probability prospect? Number 1, they have a need for what you're selling right now. Okay? If they say, I don't need it, I don't want it, I can't use it, I can't afford it, business is bad, I'm broke, and I have no future, this is not a good prospect. So people say, well, how can I sell to these people? You can't! It's like selling hamburgers to a person who just ate. They're not hungry. So the first thing you need to do is you need to say, who are the people in my market who most need my product? One of the changes that have taken place in the last few years is about 2 or 3 years ago, when business was booming, everybody was buying, is that there were more buyers than there were sellers. An idiot could be successful in selling. I work for a company that has 4,000 salespeople. It does $3 billion a year, one of the top companies in the world. The beginning of last year, not this year, but last year, they invited me to Las Vegas to speak to their top 20% of salespeople, 800. They brought them to Las Vegas, and they had them in one of these great casinos that cost $1 billion. I mean, has anybody ever been to Las Vegas? It's a most amazing, don't go. It's a most amazing place. They had this great celebration because in the year 2000, these people had a fabulous year, all right? And they brought the top 20%, set them up in the hotel, 3 days, dinners, ta-da, okay? 3 months later, this is in April of 2001, the vice president of marketing called me and said, we have a real problem. These people can't sell. I said, what do you mean you can't sell? They sold $3 billion worth last year. He said, we found that when the market turned down and people weren't simply calling up and buying, these people didn't even know how to make an appointment. They didn't know how to sell. They didn't know how to make presentations. They didn't know how to sell against higher or lower priced competition. They don't know how to sell. We have a real disaster on our hands. And he literally said, is there any way you can do, anything you can do to help us? And he went out and he was literally on the road for the next year, just traveling around, bandaging up wounded sales forces. Because he said, these people who we thought were our superstars can't sell anything. So your job is to realize that the market has changed. It used to be that there were more customers than there were salespeople. Now there's more salespeople than there are customers. It used to be you could machine gun the market, and now you have to rifle the market. You have to pick your shots very carefully. You have to be more focused. You have to do more preparation when you're dealing with customers. You have to give more thought to who it is who can use your product or service. And you have to work harder to get appointments with key people. You can't just rush out at the market like a dog chasing a rabbit across a field. You have to be very, very focused. That's one of the things that I have learned in the last couple of years. It requires a complete mind shift. So you have to ask yourself, who is a high probability prospect? Number one is they need your product or service. Number two, they can afford it. They have the money. You don't call on bankrupt.com businesses and try to make sales, because they're thinking of killing themselves. You know, they're not thinking of buying what you have to offer, and even if they do buy it, they can't pay for it. So you also want a company, you want people who like and respect your industry and your business, and best of all, people who like and respect you. You want to deal with people who are decisive and who can make a decision. I have a friend who went through my program a couple of years ago and went straight to the top of his business in the next year. And it was with one idea. I said to him that you need to make sure that the person you're talking to can and will buy from you within a reasonable period of time. Don't keep calling back on people who won't buy or who can't buy. So he started doing this. He wrote me a letter. He said 1 year later he had tripled his income from 30,000 US to 90,000 US, and he had become the #1 person in his industry. Whenever he met with a prospect, he would say, oh, by the way, if I show you something that you really like, or if you really like what I'm showing you, what sort of time frame would you be thinking about for making a decision? Pretty honest question. And people will tell you. They'll say, well, within a few weeks or a couple of months or by the end of the summer. Or, well, we're kind of looking right now, we're gathering information. He found that every customer he'd had in the last 3 or 4 years had bought within 90 days. Almost everyone had bought within 90 days of the first meeting. So that was his outside line. If a person says that they're thinking of making a decision within 2 or 3 months, good. He would work on them and spend time with them. If they said they were thinking of making a decision next year, they were just gathering information, remember, what companies will do is they'll have somebody who's not busy. And they'll say, well, why don't you call around and get some information on this product or service. See if it's available, how much people are asking for it, and so on. So they call you up and they say, I'm calling from big company, and I want to know how much are your products or services? And you say, oh, this, well, could you come and give me a presentation? Oh, yes, yeah. And you get there and there's 3 or 4 of your competitors sitting in the waiting room. These people are just gathering information. And so therefore he would always ask, what sort of, good, even on the phone, by the way, what sort of time frame are you looking at for making a decision? If it was within 2 or 3 months, he would go to work on them. If it was beyond 2 or 3 months, he'd say, well, let me introduce you to one of the people in my office who has no future. And you can spend time with him. Now, I don't know how it works in Singapore, but let me tell you something that changed my life when I was working here in Southeast Asia. I used to say, finish a sales presentation, and the person would say, well, let me think it over. And I would say, okay, I'll call back. Or he would say, let me think it over, and you get back to me later. And I used to accept, okay, I'll get back to you later, you think it over. I want to think it over, by the way, are the words for goodbye forever. When a person says, I want to think it over, they don't think it over, they say goodbye forever. So I finally, one day, I got so tired of this, I said, I'm sorry, I don't make callbacks. What? I don't call back. Because I've told you everything that I can possibly tell you already. So now at this moment, you know everything you need to know to make a decision. There is no more information. So either it's a good idea for you, or it's not a good idea. But there's no point in thinking it over because you know everything there is already. So why don't you just take it? And the person said, well, all right. And I went to the next office and I said the same thing. Well, let me think it over. I don't make callbacks. Well, then I'll take it. And I went to the third office. I made 3 sales in 25 minutes. I was making 1 or 2 sales a week. I made 3 sales in 25 minutes. I almost died. I had to run and go to the bathroom. I was so excited. And then I realized it was me that was causing the problem. As soon as the person says, well, let me think it over, I say, okay, you think it over, yay, think it over, think it over. Then I spent half my life going back. And as soon as I walked out the door, they went into a 3-year meeting. Do you know what a 3-year, yes, right, you've been calling them for 3 years. They're still in a meeting, right? I'm sorry, he's still in a meeting, you know. I know, I've been there. I said, I don't make callbacks. Now, once time passed, I became more successful. I'm selling much bigger projects, especially training programs and so on. People would say, well, can you do a proposal for us? And so I wrote a few proposals. Oh, these were beautiful proposals. I spent hours writing them and rewriting them. I'd send them in, and it might as well have been throwing them off the edge of the earth because they disappeared. I said, did you get my proposal? Well, it's here somewhere. We didn't have a chance to read it. How about a month later? Well, we lost it. Could you send it again? By Federal Express. So I'd send it again. A week or 2 weeks would go by. Did you get my proposal? Well, we're looking at a lot of proposals right now, and yours looks really good. And so we're going to compare it with others. Finally, the next time someone said, would you do a proposal for us? I said, I don't do proposals. You don't do proposals? No. If you want to do business together, we'll discuss it. I'll write you a letter of intent that outlines the agreement, but I don't do proposals. Well, all right then, if you don't do proposals. All the others do proposals. I said, I don't do proposals, I do follow-up letters of agreement. Well, I never heard such a thing. When are you planning to make a decision anyway? Well, we're just looking at it for the next few years, you know. We're really not in the market right now. And so, I have never done another proposal, and I never make callbacks. And you know something? My sales doubled and tripled and quadrupled. And all my friends are busy doing proposals. They're still waiting to hear back. Anyway, we create most of our problems. So with a high probability prospect, you can say, how soon would you be making a decision? Or if I show you exactly what you're looking for, or if I show you something that you really like at a price that really makes sense to you, when would you be thinking of making a decision? So you want people that need it, that want it, that can afford it, that can make a decision, that like you, that respect you, and so on. Now, what is the best part of selling? Psychologically, mentally, what's the best part of selling? I'll tell you what it is. It's making sales. If you're having trouble with that answer, you're in the wrong field. It's the feeling of winning that we have from making sales. It's when we feel happy. We make a sale and we feel happy. It releases endorphins in our brain. It makes us feel high. We feel cheerful. We feel wonderful about ourselves when we make sales. That's the key
to our business. What's the downside of selling? What's the psychological negative of selling? It's dealing with difficult people. It's long, drawn-out meetings. It's not making sales. It's working hard and not succeeding. We love to succeed. We hate the feeling of not succeeding. So what is the problem in selling? It's working with people who are down here, low probability prospects. By the way, when you work with low probability prospects, you know what happens? It wears you down. It tires you out. And you even start to think about quitting. And we did some research on you before tonight, and we find there are people in this very room who have thought about quitting. We know who you are. It's okay. Everybody thinks about quitting. We had a bad day, you think about quitting. You had a bad week, you think about quitting until you get something to drink. And you think, well, it's not so bad. Sometimes all you need to do is get a good night's sleep. Sometimes you need to go home for the weekend and just turn off your mind and get rested up again. By Monday, you're back to work again. Everybody thinks about quitting. It's okay to think about quitting. It's even okay to talk about quitting. How many times have you sat at home with your wife, your husband, and talked about quitting? You know, I'm thinking of quitting. You're thinking about quitting? Well, that's a good idea. Why don't you quit? I'm thinking about quitting. It's okay. You're not making any money anyway. Why don't you quit? You know. It's okay to talk about quitting. Just don't quit. All right? Talking about it is a way of getting it out of your system. You sort of you vent, all right? But you just don't do it. You can talk about it and think about it. It's a psychological release. But what causes us to think about quitting is dealing with difficult people, low probability prospects. Now, who is a low probability prospect? A low probability prospect is a difficult person who doesn't really see any need for your product or service. They probably don't have any money anyway, and they probably don't have the authority to buy. Not only that, they criticize you, and they complain about your product, and they compare you unfavorably to your competitors. Well, your competitor's cheaper than you, your competitor's better than you, your competitor's nicer than you. We've been dealing with your competitors. We're very happy working with your competitors, and we've heard terrible things about you anyway. In other words, they're negative towards you. They're not in a position to make a decision. Has anybody dealt with these kind of people, by the way? I'm going to tell you something about yourself. You are a thoroughly good person. You are a thoroughly good person. You have a good heart. You are honest. You're decent. You're hardworking. You're polite. You're respectful. You're helpful. You want to help people with your product or service. Isn't that true? Say yes. Okay. Then you have the right to expect that other people treat you the same way. If you treat them nicely and respectfully and kindly, and you're trying to help them with your product or service, because what you are is a traveling helper. The whole purpose of your selling is to find people who you can help to improve their life or work with your product. And so therefore you're trying to do them as much of a favor as they would do to you. So you deserve to be treated well. You deserve that people treat you nicely. And if they don't treat you nicely, I hereby give you permission to get up and walk out. Okay? Because it is dealing with difficult prospects that wears us down. It grinds us down. I'll tell you a quick story. General George Patton was in charge of the Third Army in World War II. Now, you may be familiar with military history, but he was the most effective tank commander, combat general that the Americans had. He was very, very formidable, very good, very fast, very clever, and was able to capture something like 350,000 German troops in a series of brilliant maneuvers that have never been matched before. And in World War II in Europe, the soldiers were being fed in like meat into a grinder and were all being killed. As a matter of fact, most of them didn't think that they would live. However, after the D-Day invasion, soldier after soldier was applying to transfer into Patton's army. They were applying for transfers to get into Patton's army. Now, why is that? Well, the answer was that Patton had a philosophy, and that is, don't waste your men. Is take care of the men as much as possible. So when he started an attack, he would have orders in advance that if the attack had not been successful in 2 hours, to stop the attack. Because what he found was this, that after 2 hours, the casualty rates would start to go up at a rapid rate. That was his break point. So the attack would start at the end of 2 hours. If it wasn't successful, they cut it off. And what happened, because men would get tired, they'd make mistakes, start to shoot each other, you know. And, you know, it happens because it's
It's hard work, I can tell you. Anyway, it meant that the casualty rates in Patton's Third Army were lower than any other army on the Western Front. If you got into Patton's army, your chance of living through the war was far greater. Now here's the metaphor or the analogy that I'm drawing. In selling, if you are dealing with difficult people and you cut it off quickly, you keep yourself up. But if you spend time dealing with difficult people, they wear you down. They tire you out. They depress you and they make you angry. You go home and your self-esteem is down. You feel like a loser. You feel like you're not very good at selling. So from now on, if you find that you're dealing with a difficult person, break it off quickly. Say, you know, this is probably not the right product for you, but thank you very much for your time, and you have a wonderful life. Okay? Okay? And if you do that, what's going to happen naturally? If you stop spending time with difficult prospects, what will you end up spending more? Who will you end up spending more time with? Good prospects. And you know, have you noticed? If you talk to a prospect, what is your name? Henry. Okay. I'm talking to Henry, and Henry's interested, and he's asking questions. We're going back and forth. And Henry can't buy today for some reason, so a sale doesn't take place. But you still feel happy afterwards because you had a good conversation with a nice person. Isn't that true? So you feel good and you're out, you're ready to go to the next call, even though you didn't make it wasn't successful, it wasn't the right thing for Henry. That's not the problem. The problem is dealing with difficult people. People who don't appreciate you and people who are not nice to you. So from now on, for the rest of your career, don't deal with difficult people. Because there's several reasons. Number one, they're not going to buy anyway. So you're wasting your time. Number two, if they do buy, they won't pay. Number three, if they do buy and they do pay, they complain all the time. They're always complaining, always calling you up and having you come over so they can complain to you. You know, they're what are called customers from hell. And you all know what I'm talking about. And there are many companies today that have done this analysis that we're talking about, and they've decided to fire their customers. They've decided that there are some customers that are not worth it, and they call them up and they say, you know, we would not like to have your business anymore. We would like you to go and buy from our competitor and ruin their life. Because the most important thing you have is the fact that you're up. You're optimistic, you're positive, you're happy, you're high energy, you're a nice person, you are well informed about your product, you have something valuable to sell at a good price, and your job is to get to the people who will appreciate it. Now, in a good market, everybody's buying. In a bad market, not so many people are buying, so you're going to have to call on more people in order to make the same number of sales. So you don't weep and cry, you say, well, this is just the way it is. If it's hot outside, you don't say, wah, it's so hot, wah, wah. It's like weather. The economy is like the weather. You can't do anything about it, you just adjust to it, right? And you don't complain about it. You say, business is bad. No, you say, well, business is slower today than it was before. But when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And here's a wonderful thing. If you can succeed in today's economy, when the economy does turn around, and it always does, you will be so far ahead. You will be smarter, you will be quicker, you'll be more determined, you'll be more focused, you'll be more confident. So look upon it as a challenge to make you strong. Just like a runner will often run with weights or carry weights. Imagine that this is a weight that you're carrying, and when the economy turns around, you take off the weight and you will be wonderful at your field. So look upon it as a challenge. And people say, business is bad. Isn't that good? Say, that's good. That's good. Isn't that great? Because all the weaklings quit. Leaves more money for the professionals. Someone says, boy, business is hard, sales are hard. You say, yeah, why don't you quit? Yeah, get out of here. Okay. So prospecting means to ask, is this a good prospect? And when you call people, when you prospect for people, say, hello, this is Brian Tracy. I'm with ABC Company, and I think we can help you. And whenever you prospect, always talk about the result or the benefit of your product or service. You see, a good prospect is interested in the result or benefit of what you sell. A poor prospect always says, how much is it? How much is it? How much is it? Well, you don't even know what it is yet, but how much is it? Well, that's too much. Well, it's too much for what? Well, whatever it is, it's too much. You know what I'm talking about, Henry? Drives you crazy. You say, come here a little bit closer. Whack.
ow, 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 ow. You know, you want to hit. But a good prospect, when you say, I think we can save you a good deal of money in your word processing costs, or I think that we can really speed up your time of delivery, or we can really improve what you're doing and give you better service at the same price. A good prospect wants to know how. Well, how does it work, or what is it? A poor prospect says, how much is it? I can't afford it. Cost too much. Business is bad. Life's a bitch, and then you die. You know. So it's really important. So prospecting is important. Now, I want to show you what I call the golden triangle of selling. Now, the golden triangle of selling is my own invention. And it's, I think, basically the key to modern selling. It has three parts. And let's put the customer or the prospect in the center. And it has three parts. And the first part, part one, is what I call relationship selling. Now, relationship selling is the key to success now and for the future. Is the very best salespeople are very good. We call them relationship experts. They're very, very good at forming high-quality relationships with people that they meet. We say that there's two parts. This first part of selling is prospecting. The second part is developing rapport or establishing a friendly relationship with the customer. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. My friend Lou Holtz says whenever you meet a new person in business or even personally, they only want to know the answer to one question. Do you care about me? Do you care about me? They don't care about your product. Forget your product. Do you care about me? How can you show a person that you care about them? How can you show a person that you care about them more than just wanting to make a sale? Right from the time you meet them. Well, okay, I'll give you several ideas. Obviously my coming here was an emergency. So they flew me in on a jet. When you meet a person for the first time, recognize that everybody's busy. So what I always do is I say, thank you very much for your time. I know how busy you are. As soon as you do that, you immediately separate yourself from the average person who just starts talking. I thank you very much for your time. I know how busy you are. People immediately stop because people don't recognize how busy they are. Nobody appreciates anybody else's time. Now, whenever you phone a person and you get through to the person, the very first thing you say is, hello, this is Brian Tracy, or this is Henry. Is this a good time to talk? I need about 2 minutes of your time to ask you a couple of quick questions. Is this a good time for you? As soon as you say that, the person stops because it's obvious you're a professional. You must be in the top 10% or moving there very quickly. Because this is how the top 10% talk. This is based on thousands of studies. The top 10% are very respectful of people's time. They don't say, hi, this is Brian Tracy, I want to call you. No. What they do is say, hi, this is Brian Tracy, is this a good time for you? Now, I do this with my best friends. When I call them and I get through to them in business, they take the call because it's me, and I say, hi, Mike, is this a good time for you? I need about 2 minutes. And sometimes they say, you know, Brian, somebody just came into my office. I got 2 other people here. The building's on fire. Most cases, something's going on. Remember, every single call that you make on a customer is an interruption. Every single call you make is an interruption. You are interrupting them from something that at that moment is more important than you are. So what you do is just slow down a bit and you say, is this a good time? And if you meet them face to face, you say, thank you very much for your time. I know how busy you are. They'll immediately relax and realize you're a professional. And they'll treat you very differently because you're treating them very differently. What you're saying is, I care about you. I care about you as a person, and I know how busy you are. So relationship selling is based on establishing a high-quality relationship. And I'll give you the other 2 parts of the triangle, and I want to come back to relationship selling because it really is the key to your future. The second part of the triangle, set number 2, is what we call consultative selling. And consultative selling is where you position yourself as a problem solver. You position yourself as a consultant. I'll explain this in a second. And the third part of selling is what we call educational selling, where you don't sell as much as you educate or teach. You teach the person, you learn the person's situation with questions, and then you teach them how your product or service can help them in a cost-effective way. You see, teaching is really the key to the future of selling. You're not trying to sell. You're not trying to talk people out of money. You're trying to teach them how they can improve their life or their work with what you do. The number one reason that people buy your product or service is they understand how much better off they can be. The number one reason why they don't is because they don't understand how much better off they can be, because you didn't teach them. You may have assumed that they know, but you didn't teach them. Well, let me show you something that I think is one of the great breakthroughs in the psychology of selling, and it has to do with what is called positioning. Now, I know you're all familiar with positioning. Positioning is a trend in marketing started by Al Ries and Jack Trout, who wrote a book some 20 years ago called Positioning: The Battle for the Mind of the Customer. And positioning says that here's a customer, typical customer. Okay? And in the back of the customer's mind, there's a series of file boxes, very much like the boxes behind the check-in desk of one of the old hotels, okay, for mail messages and keys. Now, when the customer sees you, okay, here's you, or hears you, or thinks about you, the customer then opens a box for you. This is your box in the customer's mind. And by the way, you're exactly the same. The first impression is the most lasting impression. That's why we say you never get a second chance to make a good first impression. But whatever is in that customer's box determines how the customer reacts to you, thinks about you, feels about you, responds to you, takes your calls, buys from you, doesn't buy from you, and so on. So, in this box is you. The question is, what's in the customer's box with regard to you? Now, in positioning, what we do is we say that your job is to shape this positioning. We say that perceptions, the customer's perception of you, equals the customer's reality of you. I'll give you an example. I was in Shanghai earlier this week, and this fellow, nice guy, not very well dressed, square head, looked like his head had been put inside a box and then grew. Square head, nice guy, not particularly handsome, not very well dressed, average guy. And he came in, and Richard and Patrick said, "You've got to meet this guy." And I said, "Great, I mean, wonderful." They said, "This guy was just written up in Forbes as one of the richest men in China. He developed a software program that had been bought by a major company, and they paid him $46 million cash. He's one of the richest young entrepreneurs in China, and he's come to this seminar." And they brought him in, and I said, "Wow, how are you? Would you like a business card? Would you like 2 business cards? Would you like, would you like several for your friends?" My perception of him, although he is very ordinary looking, my perception of him is, whoa, because he's so successful in such a difficult market and written up in Forbes magazine, highly respected, probably richer than almost the whole rest of the audience put together. Can you see what I mean? My perception of him. Now, what if somebody said, "Just joking, he's the taxi driver"? Because he looked like it. I mean, he could have been a taxi driver. But because they had created a positioning of him in my mind, my picture in my mind of this guy, when they said, you're going to meet this guy when he comes in, he's one of the richest men in China, I'm thinking, wow. And he's very ordinary looking, but his perception was, wow. Anything he said, I was going to listen to. The point is this, is it doesn't matter the truth of the perception. A person's perception is reality. What is your name, sir? Pardon? Dedian? Daniel. Okay. Daniel, say, "I fly jet planes." Just say, "I fly jets.
I fly jets.
And I run marathons."
And I run marathons.
Okay. So now, if Daniel said to me, "I fly jets and I run marathons," I'd say, okay. I'm not going to argue with him. I mean, he seems like an honest person. If he says it, then I believe it. Okay? So I accept what he says as the truth. So when you meet customers for the first time, what you say to your customer, they accept as the truth. If you say, "My name is Brian Tracy, and I believe very much in the importance of good relationships with my customers. Our philosophy is to give superb customer service to our customers. People say, okay, you say it's true? No, I say it's true. And then we watch to make sure that what you say is consistent with what you said. So in interviewing tens of thousands of customers, we have asked them, how do you think and talk about the top salespeople? Now, we know who the top salespeople are when we ask them. And we know who the medium salespeople are, and so on. We find that salespeople have three positioning statements, or customers have three positioning statements about top salespeople. Number one is they see them as friends. They like them. They feel they're good people. They say, this person cares about me more than they care about making a sale. Number two, they say, I view this person as a consultant more than as a salesperson. I see him or her more as an advisor, a counselor, a guide, and so on. And number three, they see this person more as a teacher or a helper, a person who shows them how they can be better off. So your job is to create these three perceptions. The perception of being a high-quality relationship, an advisor and helper, a consultant, a problem solver, and a person who teaches rather than sells. If a customer sees you like that, they will buy from you. They will buy from you more readily. They will buy from you more regularly, and they will recommend you to their friends because they want their friends to buy from you as well. So your job is to influence this perception. And everything that you say counts. Here's the rule. Everything counts. Everything counts. Everything that you say counts. Everything that you do counts. Every interaction counts. We say that when you're talking to customers, you're talking about their money. And money is a very emotional issue. So they are hypersensitive to everything you say or do. If you say you'll be there at 10 o'clock and you come at 10 minutes after 10, they remember that. Is not on time for appointments, therefore can't be trusted. Is not dependable, therefore product is no good, therefore company is no good. Therefore prices are too high, therefore too dangerous to buy from this person. You say, well, how are you just coming late? I mean, how? Because you said you'd be there at 10. And you didn't come at 10, so you didn't do what you said you would do. And if a person has half a brain and they're nervous, then what they do is they say that you probably won't deliver the product on time, and you probably won't service it if you say you will, and nothing else you say is true either. People say, well, what does it matter? Customers, you were talking about money. Money is very emotional. As they say, money's not the most important thing in life, but it's way up there with oxygen. You know. So, everything counts, and everything that you do affects this positioning. You see, if you have a great positioning so that people think and talk about you in a positive way, then whenever you call them, say, oh, I'll take his call, or her call, and I got something I want to talk to you about. Good. And they'll see you more readily. They'll buy from you. Here's a good example. Is there anybody here who has a customer that buys from you without asking the price? I mean, after they've bought from you, they buy again, and they don't ask the price. You have customers like that? They just say, yes, I need some more. Say yes. Well, is it because they don't care about the price? Why is it that they would buy without asking the price a second time? It's because your position is such that the prices that you charge will be the right prices. They will be fair prices. They'll be reasonable prices. They will be honest prices. Isn't that true? So they don't need to ask the price. It's like if you go to a restaurant, you don't need to ask, well, how much is every single, bit of fried rice? How much do I get? So in other words, once they trust you, and this brings us to the relationship selling model, and we say that there's two models of selling. There's the old model of selling, which is how I was brought up, and then there's the new model of selling. Now, the old model of selling had four parts. The four parts, the first part of the old model of selling was establishing rapport. We're talking about, but it was very quick. Hi, how are you? And immediately start talking about your product or service. There are still a lot of salespeople who sell like this. They don't take any time to get to know and understand the customer. The second 20% of the old model was qualifying. We'd find out if they had, how much money they had before we would spend any time with them. The third part of the old model, 30%, was presenting, and this is where you used every trick possible to talk them out of the money you determined that they had in stage number 2. And the last 40% of the old model of selling was closing, and all the emphasis was on closing the customer to get them to buy. In the 70s, the market began to shift. As people became smarter and better educated, as the market became more competitive, The market shifted and it went through a transition to the new model of selling. Now, the new model of selling has 4 parts as well. The first 40% of the new model of selling is building trust. Now, we call this the relationship selling model. And if you can build enough trust, everything else will take care of itself. If you can't, nothing else will work, not even low prices. You know and I know that building trust is the key to all relationships. The most important people in your life are the people you trust. The most important people in your work life, family life. The most important part of relationships is to be able to trust people. Absolutely. And so trust is what starts a relationship. So the way that you build trust in sales is you ask questions about people's needs. Now, the interesting thing is, the more you ask questions about what the person really needs, what they are doing now, how it's working, and listen to the answers, the more they trust you. And the more they trust you, the more they give you information about what they need. And the more they give you information and the more you listen, the more they trust you. And eventually the customer will reach a point where they feel so comfortable with you that they will tell you everything that you need to know to help them, or to tell them that this is not a good product for them. They know that you will never sell them something that they don't need. You're a professional. So when you ask questions about their needs, you position yourself as a consultant. When you listen closely to the answers, you tell them that you really care for them. So you simultaneously build the 2 parts of the golden triangle, relationship selling and consultative selling. The third part of the new model of selling, this is 30, identifying needs is 30%. The third part, 20%, is presenting. And presenting is where you show the prospect exactly how your product or service will satisfy the person's needs. You show them how, and what we have found by watching the thousands of videotapes is that top salespeople have the ability to match products and services much better than average salespeople. In other words, when they sell, they only talk about what the customer has said is important. They don't talk about everything. They don't talk about everything they like. They listen carefully to what the prospect has said, and then they say, well, based on what you've said, our product or service will do this. Have you ever had an experience where you've gone to a store and the person said, can I help you? And you said, yes, I'm looking for this. And they said, yes, okay, follow me. And they take you and they show you something that is not at all what you said. Have you had this experience? You want to whack them right in the back of the head. Because it means they don't care about me. They weren't listening. They're wasting my time. But then you've had the other experience. The other experience is where you go to the store and you tell the person what you're looking for, and they say, did you want this or this? Well, this. I think we've got something. Come with me. And they take you, and there it is, and it's exactly what you described. The sale has been made, hasn't it? I mean, you've literally decided to buy because they've matched so closely what you said. So here's a rule in psychology. It is that people don't argue with their own information. They will argue with your information, but they won't argue with their own information. So therefore, if you show them that this is what they said and your product or service is exactly what they said, the sale has almost been made. Because people have, it has been identified in psychology as what is called consistency. Human beings have an intense inner desire to remain consistent with what they said. Have you ever had your kids say, Daddy, you said? But you just said, remember you said? Have you ever heard this? You don't remember saying it, but you feel compelled to do whatever it was because they told you that you said it. When a person says, this is what we need, this is what we want, this is our problems, and you say, well, our product will do this and it will do that and we'll solve that problem, people try to remain consistent with what they said. They don't argue with their own information. So therefore, really good salespeople make sure that their presentation fits like a hand in a glove into what the customer says they want. Oh, damn, this is good. All right. The last part, the last 10%, is confirming. Does this make sense to you? Do you like this? Is this what you're looking for? Until the customer says, yes, that makes sense, and then you can go on to close the sale. Now, let me give you the simplest of all closing techniques. It's called the invitational close, is where you simply say, well, if you like it, why don't you give it a try? Why don't you take it?
Why don't you buy it? Or if you're selling services, say, well, if this makes sense to you, why don't you give us a try? The invitational close, why don't you give it a try, is a simple, powerful closing technique, one of the most powerful ever developed for a customer who's reached the end of the sales presentation. Do you like this so far? Yes, well, why don't you take it? I was speaking to a salesman in New York last week. He said, you know, that doubled my income. He said, it's my favorite closing technique. And he's a very successful guy. And double his income is a lot of money. He said, I'll double it again next year. He said, every single time I talk to a prospect, I present it, I ask any questions, I say, you have any questions? The person says, no. He says, why don't you take it? He said, it's amazing. They say, okay. So always, at the end of a sales conversation, invite the person to buy. Even if they say, well, I don't know, I'm not sure, let me think it over. You say, look, why don't you just take it? Okay. It's the most amazing darn thing. Look, you need it. You're going to get it sooner or later. This is a good price. We stand behind it. Why don't you just take it? Okay. It solves the problem. Remember, a product or service that a person needs solves the problem if you can sell it to them. Why don't you give it a try? Even if they're taking you by the neck and throwing you out into the street, say, why don't you take it? And often they say, oh, bring them back. We'll take it. You know. So always never leave a sales conversation. I used to come to the end of a sales talk, and I would be very enthused, and I've got the appointment, I've made the presentation, everything else, and then I say, well, what do you think? You ever done that? Well, what do you think? The person says, well, I think I'd like to think it over. Which means goodbye forever. We'll never meet again. Okay, so this is the new model, and the new model is the relationship selling model, and here's the rule. Listening builds trust. Listening builds trust. And trust is the key to sales success in the 21st century. Your job is to build one trust relationship after another. Because even if they don't buy from you today, if the trust relationship has been established and you keep in touch with them, remember, salespeople, top salespeople are optimists. They make more calls, they call back more often. It may be the person can't buy today, but they will buy next week, next month. Trust is the critical factor. I got a ride to the airport by this salesman in Atlanta, Georgia, and brand new Mercedes. And he was taking me to the airport, and he said, how do you like my car? I said, it's beautiful. And he said, you want to know how I got it? I said, sure. He said, well, I listened to your material year after year, especially that part about persistence, continuing to call back. I called on this major Fortune 500 company, and we sell telecommunication services, wireless, telephone, fiber optics, satellite communications, and this is a major company. This company is spending $3 million a year on our services with our competitor. So I called on him and I made a presentation, and he said, really liked it, looks good. He said, but you know, we've been with this other company for many years, and we're quite happy with this other company. We really don't need your services. I mean, I really enjoy looking at this. I like to keep informed about what's going on in the industry, but we're going to stay with our existing supplier. He said, well, that's fine. He said, but I'd like to keep in touch with you and keep you informed on what's going on in this industry, because there's so many changes taking place that you should know what's going on. He said, well, that's fine. I like to keep informed. He said, if you want to keep in touch with me, that's fine. He said, but we're not changing. We're happy with our existing supplier. So he, once a month, would call back on this major decision maker. And he would bring in new information. And they would have a cup of coffee, spend 15, 20 minutes. And he'd say, is there anything I can do to help you? He said, no, we're fine. Everything's going fine. About 6 months after this started, I'm going every month. He said, Bill, he said, you know, I really appreciate you dropping in each month and keeping me informed and everything else. He said, but you know, we're really happy with the people we're dealing with. How long are you going to continue calling back on me? He said, until one of us dies. So, he said, you're really serious, aren't you? He said, yes, I am. He said, because this industry is changing so rapidly that there will come a time where we will have something that nobody else will have. We will be able to service you better than your existing supplier. He said, well, you know, if you're willing to spend the time, you go ahead. He called on them every month for a whole year. At the end of the year, their existing supplier put in a rate increase and didn't tell anybody. And in the United States, if you put in a rate increase, all you have to do is publish it somewhere in some newspaper. Nobody has to see it. But then you can say, you published it, it was public. And the next year it was a 22% rate increase. He saw it on the bill. The first time he saw it, it came up on the bill. It made him so mad, he called him in. He said, come in, we're going to give you the whole account. He said his commission for the first sale, the first year, was $186,000. US. And he said he bought a brand new Mercedes with it. So, until one of us dies. All right, listening builds trust. But the key is, once you've built the trust, keep the plate spinning. Just keep the relationship going. Remember, things are changing. Sometimes the biggest sale you'll make will take a year or 2 years before it comes together, and it'll be so big. I had one gentleman make one sale as a result of using some of these principles. He said he made one sale that was 68% of his entire year's quota in one sale, because it was solely based on building trust and maintaining that trust. So here are the 4 keys to listening. Number 1, listen attentively. Listen closely. Listen without interrupting. This is what tells the person that you care about them. Listen attentively. Lean forward. Nod. Smile. Pay close attention. And don't interrupt. Just listening closely to people causes them to feel better about themselves and like you more, and they like themselves more. Number 2 is pause before replying. Just pause. Allow for silence. Don't feel that you have to jump in. Just say, nod, smile, That's an interesting point. And number 3 is question. We say question for clarification. And the very best question you'll ever learn in selling, and I've had many people say that this one question has been worth everything to them, is the question, how do you mean? How do you mean? We can't afford it. How do you mean? Business is bad. How do you mean? We're happy with our existing supplier. How do you mean? We're not in the market right now. How do you mean? I don't like you. I don't like your company. I don't like your industry. And quite frankly, I'm not interested in doing business with you. How do you mean exactly? Here's the point. How do you mean is a control question. But it's also an invisible control question. An invisible control question is one that you can ask over and over again, and the person will always answer it. And they will always expand on what they said. You say, we can't afford it. How do you mean? Well, our business has been a bit slow lately. Well, how do you mean exactly? Well, we're down from the third quarter sales. Well, how do you mean? Well, we expected our sales to be this in the third quarter. In other words, every time you say, how do you mean, it opens up. But it's invisible because the question is never heard, only the answer. And as they give you the answer, very often you can see an opportunity to make the sale. You can see an opportunity to answer the objection and make the sale. So keep asking, how do you mean? How do you mean? And here's the rule, is the person who asks questions has control. The person who asks questions has control. The person answering the questions is controlled by the questioner. If you're in a sales conversation and they ask you a question, you're in danger of having them take control. Because as soon as you start answering, they're becoming the marionette and you're the puppet. Okay? So when a person asks you a question, what do? You say, that's a good question. Let me ask you something. And you ask your own question and take control. That's a good question, but let me ask you something. How do you mean exactly? Or what are you doing in this area? Or how is that working for you? Or when would you be thinking of making a decision if you found exactly what you were looking for? It doesn't matter what your question is, take control. The person who asks questions has control. By the way, I'm speaking primarily to the men here because the women all know this. Women are brilliant at controlling conversations with questions. Oh, they're so dangerous. I have 2 daughters, 22 and 10, and there's a stage in a woman's life where they're taken away by other women to a cave in the mountain, and they're taught how to control men for the rest of their lives. And ever after, they can control you with words and questions. For instance, you ask them something, they say nothing. They know that if they answer, you've taken control, so they won't respond. It's very unnerving for men. Now, they also, if you get into an argument with them, they fight back with. You saw a crouching tiger fight with a sword. They fight back with questions. And by the time you're finished, you were in the right when you started, and you're in the wrong now. Women know that they can control a little 100-pound woman can control a 200-pound man with questions.
They can control him with questions so powerfully. They can control him with one-word questions. Oh? They can control him with nonverbal questions. He's across a crowded room talking to another woman, and she goes... It's like an icicle through the heart. So, the person who asks questions has what? Has control. So it's really important. And when you ask questions, you get a chance to listen. And listening builds trust. And trust is the key to effective selling. Are you with me so far? So therefore, the last part of questioning is feed it back. Feed it back in your own words. Just say, let me make sure I understand what you're saying. This is what consultants do. Instead of jumping in and responding, say, let me make sure I understand what you just said. This is what you're doing now. These are your plans for the next couple of years. These are your concerns, and this is what you're looking for. The very fact that you feed it back exactly the way they said it causes them to suddenly see you totally differently. They trust you completely. And if you feed it back accurately, they assume you have the proper solution. They are 80-90% sold by the very fact that you fed it back to them accurately what they said. It's like if you go into a store and you say, I'm looking for this. And you say, you're looking for this and this and this? You say, yeah, good, I think we have that. You go and buy it because they were able to feed it back so accurately. So relationship selling, consultative selling means to focus on the customer's needs. Keep asking the customer about what he or she is doing. How is it working? There's a direct relationship between questions and sales success. The more questions you ask, the more likely it is you'll make the sale. And the person who asks questions has control. And when you ask questions, you get a chance to listen. And listening builds trust. So these are the critical parts of psychological selling. Now here's the final point. Is the great uneasiness that we have in selling is because of the fear of failure and the fear of rejection. It's fear of rejection more than anything else that holds salespeople back. Fear of being told, no, I'm not interested, I don't want it, and so on. However, when you position yourself as a relationship builder, when you position yourself as a consultant, when you position yourself as a teacher, and you focus on asking questions and listening closely to the answers, and then helping customers get what they want with what you sell, all the stress goes out of the sales conversation, both for you and for the customer. And selling becomes a joyous thing. You become happy about it. And if you then make a decision, I'm not going to spend any time with difficult people. I'm not going to spend any more time with them. I'm going to introduce them to each other and let them go off and ruin each other's lives. If you make a decision that from now on you're going to spend time with people that you like and you're going to treat them well and you're going to ask them good questions and listen carefully to the answers and try to help them get more products and services and buy your products and services, and if business is slow, you're just going to work a little bit harder and you're going to start a little bit earlier and work a little bit harder and stay a little bit later. And if you make that decision and you make the decision that you're going to be in the top 10% in your field and you work at it every day and the only question you ask is what? How? If the only question you ask is how with regard to your future dreams and your goals and becoming the best in your field and achieving your sales goals, you keep yourself optimistic all the time, you keep yourself positive, you keep yourself happy, and at the end of the day you can say with all sincerity, I like myself. Say, I like myself. Thank you very much. God bless you.
In the morning, I feel the breeze. The sun washes over me. The sound of water, the crashing sea. Is it on?